Welcome to our channel. We're thrilled to have you here for today's story. If you're new, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on our exciting content. We have something special coming tomorrow that you definitely won't want to miss. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your thoughts and feedback mean a lot to us, so grab a seat, relax, and enjoy this amazing story. And remember, make sure you're subscribed to join us for the next one. A drunk businessman versus a royal guard. Who wins when respect is tested? The energy around Buckingham Palace was electric on that summer afternoon. Tourists filled the streets, cameras flashing as they eagerly awaited the iconic changing of the guard ceremony. Among the crowd was Jack Miller, a 45-year-old wealthy businessman from New York, known for his arrogance and entitlement. He had spent his life in the upper echelons of privilege, believing that money could bend the world to his will. Today, intoxicated by alcohol and a need to impress his equally affluent friends, Jack sought a bit of entertainment at the expense of one of the royal guards. Standing perfectly still at his post was Sergeant Chris Williams, a 32-year-old royal guard with a background in the U.S. Army. His uniform, the familiar red tunic and bearskin hat, was immaculate. Beneath the ceremonial attire, however, lay the scars of 2 tours in Afghanistan, which spoke of survival and sacrifice. But his role today was not in combat. His job was to stand motionless, a symbol of discipline and honor. Yet his instincts, owned through years of military service, remained razor sharp. Jack, feeling the eyes of his friends on him, swaggered forward. The sharp scent of whiskey clung to him like cheap cologne. "I bet 100 quid this guy won't even flinch," Jack slurred, loud enough for his friends to hear, their laughter echoing through the crowd. He circled Sergeant Williams like a predator toying with its prey, mimicking the guard's rigid posture with exaggerated salutes, trying to get a reaction. But there was nothing. No twitch, no movement, just the unbroken stillness of the guard. Undeterred, Jack leaned in close, his breath hot with liquor. "You're just a statue, aren't you? A glorified mannequin." When there was still no response, Jack took it a step further. He waved his hand in front of Sergeant Williams's face, getting even closer, eager to provoke some kind of reaction. Yet, Sergeant Williams remained perfectly still, his disciplined composure never wavering, no matter how far Jack pushed. The tourists around them murmured disapprovingly. One mother even ushered her child away, shaking her head and muttering, "That man should be ashamed." But for Jack, the disapproval only fueled his antics. He thrived on the attention, and now, with the crowd's eyes on him, he felt unstoppable. "What's the point of standing there like a tin soldier if you're not even going to react?" he taunted, turning to his friends. "He's a bloody robot, I swear." But Jack's thirst for attention was about to backfire in a way he never anticipated. As Jack Miller continued his mocking antics, the tension around him grew. Tourists exchanged uneasy glances, some clearly uncomfortable with his behavior, but Jack couldn't care less. His friends egged him on, laughing and encouraging his every move. They saw it as a joke, a chance to show off in front of an audience. Jack circled Sergeant Chris Williams again, this time getting even closer, practically standing in his face. Sergeant Williams stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed ahead, his expression neutral. Jack leaned in, inches away from the guard, taunting him. "Come on, mate, you're not even real, are you? Just a puppet in a fancy uniform." No response. Sergeant Williams didn't flinch, not even a subtle shift in his posture. To Jack, it was infuriating. How could someone be so still, so unresponsive? He had no idea that behind that motionless exterior was a man with a wealth of experience, someone who had served in Afghanistan, and someone whose resilience was forged in the heat of battle. But none of that mattered to Jack. All he saw was a chance to exert control, to provoke, to get under the skin of the stoic guard. His next move was bold and reckless. Jack spit on Sergeant Williams's polished boot, a deliberate and disgusting act meant to humiliate the guard, to see if he would finally react. A hush fell over the crowd. The tourists nearby gasped, eyes wide with shock. A young girl clutched her father's hand, her innocent voice breaking the silence. "Why is that man being so mean, Daddy?" Despite the foul insult, Sergeant Williams remained unmoved. His training had taught him to ignore distractions, to stay focused no matter the provocation. But even he had limits. With a sharp crack, the wooden butt of his rifle struck the ground, the sound loud and jarring in the silence that followed. The sudden motion sent a ripple through the crowd, and for the first time, Jack stumbled backward. His bravado faltered. The Royal Guard's eyes, cold and unwavering, finally met Jack's. "Step away from the guard," Sergeant Williams commanded, his voice deep and authoritative, honed from years of service. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of someone who had faced far greater challenges than Jack could imagine. Jack's face twisted in disbelief. "Oh, so you can speak?" he sneered, trying to mask the nervousness creeping up. "What are you going to do? Arrest me?" Before Sergeant Williams could respond, a voice cut through the tension. Officer David Carter, a 40-year-old law enforcement officer who had witnessed the entire exchange, stepped forward, his expression stern. "That's quite enough," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Sir, I need you to leave the premises immediately." Jack's smirk faltered. His friends, once laughing and encouraging, now stood silent, avoiding his gaze. The crowd, emboldened by the presence of law enforcement, murmured their approval. Jack realized he had crossed a line, but there was no escaping it now. He raised his hands in mock surrender, his swagger now gone, replaced by the undeniable sting of humiliation. All right," he muttered. "No need to get dramatic." As he staggered away, the applause from the onlookers grew, quiet but unmistakable. Meanwhile, Sergeant Williams remained composed, his posture returning to its rigid perfection. For Jack, the moment was over, but the crowd around Buckingham Palace had fallen into an uneasy silence. But Jack Miller didn't seem to notice. His mind was too clouded by the alcohol and the need to impress his friends. The laughter from his group had died down, replaced by nervous glances from onlookers. Jack, still emboldened by his earlier actions, stood there staring at Sergeant Chris Williams, the Royal Guard, who remained unwavering in his stillness. Jack's bravado was faltering, but he couldn't let that show. He had pushed so far, and now there was no turning back. He leaned in closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's the point of standing there like a tin soldier if you're not even going to react? You're just a prop, a statue to look at. How does that make you feel, huh?" His words were sharp, cutting through the tense air like a knife. But still, Sergeant Williams did not respond. Not a shift in posture, not a flicker of movement. His eyes remained fixed forward, his expression as solid as ever. Jack's frustration began to boil over. In a moment of pure arrogance, Jack took it a step further, spitting directly onto Sergeant Williams's polished boot. The act was foul, a blatant attempt to provoke a response, to show that he could break the guard's discipline. The crowd gasped, shocked by the disrespect. The young girl's question from earlier echoed in Jack's mind, but he ignored it, too far gone in his need to dominate the moment. Yet, this time, something was different. Sergeant Williams's movements were sudden, like lightning striking the ground. With a loud crack, the butt of his rifle slammed into the ground. The noise was sharp, the sound of authority in motion, and it sent a jolt through the crowd. Jack Miller stumbled backward, his cocky demeanor now replaced by a flash of uncertainty. His eyes widened in disbelief. He hadn't expected this. He thought the guard would remain still, the way he had through all his previous taunts. "Step away from the guard," Sergeant Williams's voice rang out, commanding, deep and unshakable. It wasn't just a request. It was a statement of authority, one that Jack couldn't ignore. Jack, rattled for the first time that day, sneered, trying to regain control of the situation. "Oh, so you can talk?" he scoffed, his bravado returning, albeit weakly. "What are you going to do, arrest me?" Before Sergeant Williams could answer, Officer David Carter, a 40-year-old police officer, stepped into the scene. His voice was firm, and he had no patience for Jack's antics. "That's enough," Officer Carter said. "You're leaving now." The officer's authority was undeniable, and the crowd, who had been holding its breath, murmured in approval. Jack's friends, who had been egging him on earlier, now shrank back, their faces filled with embarrassment. Realizing the situation was slipping beyond his control, Jack raised his hands in mock surrender. All right," he muttered, his swagger now gone. His once confident gait was replaced by a staggering retreat. As he walked away, a small yet audible wave of applause rippled through the crowd. Jack's earlier actions had backfired, and now all he could do was retreat in disgrace. Sergeant Williams returned to his post, his stance as perfect as it had been before. His authority had been asserted, not through force, but through quiet strength. In that single brief moment, he had won. Jack had lost far more than he realized. As Jack Miller was escorted away from Buckingham Palace, the weight of the situation began to sink in. His friends, once laughing and egging him on, now avoided his gaze, embarrassed by his behavior. The crowd, once filled with murmurs of disbelief, had now fallen into an uneasy silence. Some of the tourists exchanged quiet glances, their disapproval lingering in the air. Jack's pride had been shattered. What was meant to be a moment of superiority had turned into a public humiliation. As he walked away, the sounds of quiet applause reached his ears, a small yet unmistakable gesture of approval from the onlookers. Jack's swagger had been replaced by a dull sense of defeat. His friends no longer walked beside him. They had grown distant, avoiding the humiliation of being associated with his reckless behavior. As they crossed the gates and neared the hotel, the echoes of his earlier bravado seemed like a distant memory. His mind replayed the scene over and over. Sergeant Chris Williams' unwavering discipline, the crack of the rifle striking the ground, the weight of the guard's authority. Jack hadn't expected any of it. He had anticipated mockery, a simple reaction to his taunts, but instead, he had received the silent power of someone who had seen much more in life than Jack ever would. That night, as Jack sat in the lounge of his five-star hotel, swirling a glass of whiskey, he couldn't shake the feeling of embarrassment that clung to him. His friends had long since abandoned him, too ashamed to stand by him. He sat alone, the glowing screen of his phone flickering with notifications, each one a reminder of the social media ridicule that followed his actions. Videos of the incident had spread like wildfire. Jack had become a joke to thousands of strangers. The shame crept in slowly at first, like an unwanted guest, but soon it took root. As he scrolled through the comments, a strange feeling washed over him, regret. It wasn't the kind of regret he was used to, the kind that came from business failures or decisions gone wrong. This was different. This was personal. Jack had humiliated himself in front of an entire crowd, but a week later, Jack Miller found himself standing once again outside Buckingham Palace. This time, however, there was no swagger, no whiskey-fueled bravado. Instead, there was only a quiet sense of resolve and a growing awareness of what he had done. The memory of his humiliating public display still lingered, replaying in his mind at the most unexpected times. But this time, Jack wasn't here to mock or provoke. He was here to make amends. The journey to this point hadn't been easy. His days had been spent grappling with the humiliation he had faced after the incident. The ridicule on social media had been relentless, his friends distancing themselves, too embarrassed to be associated with him. Even more painful was the quiet reflection that followed, the understanding that in his attempt to impress his peers, he had crossed a line, disrespecting a man who had earned his place in history through service and sacrifice. Sergeant Chris Williams, though unmoved by Jack's antics, had unwittingly forced him to face something he had never considered: the value of dignity, discipline, and respect. As Jack stood there, watching the tourists gather and the guards take their posts, something shifted within him. The respect he had once mocked now seemed monumental, something far beyond the ceremony and tradition. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his actions press down on him. He couldn't undo what he had done, but he knew he could make things right in a way that mattered. Approaching a nearby officer, Officer David Carter, Jack spoke with a sincerity that was long overdue. "I'd like to apologize," he said, his voice free of any arrogance or bravado. "I disrespected the guard the other day, and I want to make it right." The officer studied him for a moment before giving a slight nod. "I'll pass it along," he said. There was no mockery in his tone, just a quiet acknowledgement of Jack's attempt at redemption. Though Sergeant Chris Williams would never hear the apology directly, Jack felt a weight lift from his chest. He had done what he could to correct his mistake, but more importantly, he had changed. The man who had once looked down on... We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's story. What do you think about Jack Miller's transformation? Do you think his apology was enough to redeem his actions, or should he have done more? Sergeant Chris Williams, didn't just teach Jack a lesson in discipline and respect, he taught all of us something about the power of self reflection and personal growth. Have you ever experienced a moment where you realized you were wrong and had to make things right? How did you handle it? We know this story has a powerful message about respect, humility, and learning from our mistakes. Let us know in the comments what lesson you took away from this moment. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We post new stories like this every week, diving into moments that change people's lives in surprising ways. We're excited to hear from you, so share your thoughts and let's start a conversation. Plus, by subscribing, you won't miss our next story, where we'll dive deeper into some truly unforgettable moments. Thanks for being a part of our community.